What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Israel Adesanya talks about his next UFC fight. As Israel Adesanya and Nassourdine Imavov prepare for battle next weekend, both men have argued all the pressures on the other to win. But recently, the last stylebender insisted that where he's at right now is nothing new. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. The former middleweight champion has been booked to fight Imavov in the main event of the UFC's next card in Saudi Arabia, which is going down on February 1st. It's a huge fight for Imavov, as a win would almost certainly move him into the title shot mix. Further, there's no doubt this is the biggest fight of his career. Adesanya remains one of the biggest names in the game. For Izzy, however, the situation is much different. He's coming off back-to-back losses to Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, so another loss would be viewed as a considerable setback. Well, Imavov apparently cited that fact while talking to Shaquille Mahjouri recently. So when Mahjouri asked Adesanya to respond to Imavov's contention all the pressure's on Izzy, he said this: "No, not really. I put the pressure on myself. But if that's how he feels, that's how he feels. I've been here before." It is true that Adesanya has lost back-to-back fights before during his kickboxing years, and as we all know, he went on to achieve monumental things in MMA. But a loss against Imavov, particularly if it were a one-sided one, could close the book on Izzy's run at the top of the 185-pound division. Due to this predicament, some have wondered if maybe Adesanya could return to the light heavyweight division, but it certainly doesn't sound like the awe-inspiring striker has any plans to leave middleweight. While talking to MMA Junkie recently, Adesanya said the following: "When the other middleweight fights coming up were raised, I didn't know that all those other fights were in the month of February, but yeah, exciting times for 185. But to be honest, 185 feels boring without me. So yeah, I want to go in there and just make it interesting." So what do you make of Adesanya's comments here? And do you see him taking out Imavov and working his way back into another bout for the middleweight title? Dricus du Plessis reacts to Islam Makhachev's comments and fires back at Strickland. Islam Makhachev relayed that he believes he could win championship gold at 185, turning heads around the MMA world. But the man who currently holds that belt, Dricus du Plessis, believes the lightweight champion's fooling himself. After Makhachev quickly submitted Renato Moicano at UFC 311, the renowned fighter repeated his wish to pursue the welterweight title, but he also proclaimed he believes the middleweight belt is also a possibility. Ahead of his rematch with Strickland at UFC 312, DDP spoke with Fox Sports Australia. When asked about Makhachev's comments, here was some of what he had to say. "Look, he trains with 185ers in his gym, but there's only one world champion. So kudos to him for saying what he did, but it doesn't really matter because I'll overpower him in any situation. I know he walks around heavy, but I walk around heavy. He's a big lightweight. I'm a big middleweight. There's a big difference there." Makhachev may be one of the best lightweights to ever walk on this planet, but even his biggest supporters may doubt whether he could defeat the UFC's top middleweights. All that aside, du Plessis was also asked to respond to Strickland's recent challenge that the two should agree to keep their rematch standing. The way Strickland sees it, that's the only way they can settle it like quote-unquote men. Not surprisingly, DDP advised Strickland he should move to boxing or kickboxing if he's not interested in fighting under MMA rules. Here's some of what he had to say via social media. "Look, it's a ridiculous thing to ask. If you want to make packs about us just standing up, go do boxing. I don't go into fights thinking I have to stand up or take the guy down. I do what the situation tells me to do." Do you agree with the champion here? Or the outspoken challenger? Arman Tsarukyan calls out Charles Oliveira. As it stands right now, it looks like Arman Tsarukyan will need to secure another win before the UFC books him to battle Islam Makhachev one more time. So the lightweight contenders acknowledge what he needs to do and has begun campaigning for his next fight. Tsarukyan was supposed to fight Makhachev at UFC 311 last weekend, but a back injury forced him out of the fight one day out from the card. After UFC 311 and after Makhachev had subbed Renato Moicano, Dana White reported that Tsarukyan will need to record a win before he gets tapped for another title shot. Well, more recently, the Armenian fighter shared the following challenge, which also included a picture of his scrap with Charles Oliveira. "The number one contender has a name, and it's Arman Tsarukyan. If anyone wants to be the number one contender, they need to fight me. I'm ready and open. Don't be afraid to say my name. I promise I won't hit too hard." Now, Tsarukyan didn't explicitly call out the Bronx in that post, but immediately following UFC 311, he also noted that another bout with Oliveira makes sense. The two battled in April, and Tsarukyan won the fight by a split decision. So it'll be interesting to see if the UFC moves forward with this fight. Since they're ranked number 1 and number 2 in the division, and because the first bout was so close, it wouldn't be surprising if they run it back. But do you want to see Tsarukyan versus Oliveira too? Nassourdine Imavov sends a message to Khamzat Chimaev. The consensus is that Khamzat Chimaev will be tapped to fight the winner of the upcoming championship fight between Dricus du Plessis and Strickland. But Nassourdine Imavov believes that he can punt those plans if he takes out Israel Adesanya next weekend. Ever since Chimaev quickly finished former champion Robert Whittaker in October, everyone and their dog has been saying that Bohn will fight for the middleweight belt next. Even UFC boss man Dana White recently acknowledged that the undefeated middleweight is likely next in line for a title shot. Well, before that happens, Imavov will throw hands with Adesanya at the UFC's February 1st card in Saudi Arabia. So while talking with MMA Junkie recently, the number 5 ranked Imavov argued that he could jump past Chimaev in the title shot hunt. Of course, depending on the performance, I can get the next title shot. It can be Khamzat. The fact that I went for 4 fights in 1 year, 2 top 5, 2 top 10, that's something very significant. I'm never turning down any fights, and that's something the UFC likes a lot, so we'll see what happens. For now, I'm focusing on my next fight and we'll see after that. Could Imavov move to the front of the championship line? It would likely take a spectacular finish to do so. Imavov has gone undefeated in 4 straight fights, but he was defeated by Strickland in 2023. Speaking of middleweight championship fights, Dricus du Plessis will battle Strickland for a second time at UFC 312 on February 8th. Recently, the South African champ revealed via social media that he's already arrived in Australia, where UFC 312 will take place. Do you see DDP defeating Strickland for a second time, or will Strickland reclaim the middleweight crown? UFC updates. Let's take a look at some of the new matchups that have been booked for the UFC's upcoming schedule. Nolan King is reporting that the UFC's February 22nd card in Seattle has picked up a featherweight fight between Andre Fili and Makhachev Costa. Fili has not fought since June when he defeated Cub Swanson via split decision, and Costa submitted Shailen Nurdimbeki in his last outing, which also went down in June. AG Fight recently reported that the UFC's February 15th Vegas card has been updated, as Rinat Fagretinov has withdrawn from a bout with Gabriel Bonfim. Instead, the latter will now face Chaos Williams. Bonfim recorded a decision victory over Angie Lusa in his last bout, which took place in July. Williams, meanwhile, has not competed since last May, when he put away Carlston Harris. And Magic M MMA Bets recently reported that the UFC's March 15th Las Vegas card will feature an interesting middleweight scrap, as Marvin Vettori will take on Roman Dolidze for a second time. Vettori will be looking to reassert his presence in the title shot mix, as he hasn't fought since June of 2023, when he lost via decision to Jared Cannonier. When he faced Dolidze before in March 2023, he handed the powerful middleweight a decision loss. Dolidze, on the other hand, just fought in October and recorded a TKO victory due to injury over Kevin Holland. What's funny is that Vettori is reporting that he thought he'd been booked to fight surging middleweight Roman Kopylov. LOL, this whole time I thought it's Roman Kopylov, but it's actually Roman Dolidze. All good, different last name, same result. UFC 314 has picked up an intriguing light heavyweight tilt, as Damon Martin's reporting Nikita Krylov will square off with Dominic Reyes. Krylov is riding a 3-fight winning streak and is coming off a submission win over Ryan Spann in 2023. Reyes took out Anthony Smith in December to follow up on his knockout win over Dustin Jacoby in June, which snapped the former title challenger's 4-fight losing skid. And Marcel Dorf is reporting that the Octagon newcomer Luis Gurule will throw down with Audie Osborne at the UFC's April 5th Vegas card. Gurule has been making noise in flyweight prospect circles by going 10-0 to date, and that included a split decision win over Nick Piccini in the last run of Dana White's Contender Series. Osborne is likely in a must-win situation though, as he dropped a decision loss to Ronaldo Rodriguez in September and has lost 3 straight fights. Last but not least, recently AG Fight reported that Yang Xiaonan and Virna Jandiroba will battle at UFC 314 on April 12th in what could be a title shot eliminator for the women's strawweight division. Yan got back on track in November by recording a decision win over Tabitha Ricci after losing by a decision to the champion Weili Zhang in April. Jandiroba has won 4 in a row and is coming off a submission win over Amanda Lemos in July. Alexander Volkanovski talks about his next UFC fight. Nearly a year has gone by since we've seen Alexander Volkanovski throwing hands in the cage, but it looks like we could see the legendary featherweight back at it in the near future. Volkanovski has not competed since he lost via KO to the current featherweight king Ilia Topuria last February. On account of Volk's lengthy run as the featherweight champion, the expectation is that he'll be booked for a rematch with Topuria. After Topuria took out Max Holloway in October, he also acknowledged a rematch with Volk makes sense, even though the champion has also talked about competing at lightweight. More recently, Volkanovski spoke with Sky Sports New Zealand. When asked for a timeline for his next scrap, the Australian star said this: "Like I said, nothing's completely locked in. I was talking about being ready for March, April. They don't have an exact date, but I would say in a couple of months, few months. So yeah, I think the April date does look good, but you never know. One would think that Topuria Volkanovski 2 could headline one of the UFC's late spring cards. Here's hoping we find out soon. MMA community reacts to Alex Pereira comment. Alex Pereira is making headlines once again, but it's not because of a back and forth with a fighter or because he's bombed out yet another opponent. It's due to some issues Poatan has with longtime MMA reporter Guillem Cruz. Apparently, Pereira is angry at a story that Cruz ran about the champion's sister, Aileen Pereira. Aileen fights for Karate Combat, but she also reportedly told Cruz that she works part-time for Amazon as a way to make ends meet. She also apparently told Cruz in the interview that she hopes to quit that job. Well, after the interview ran, Poatan lit Cruz up about the story, which prompted some people to question why the star's sister needs to have another job. Here's what the Brazilian star had to say. We should note that the comments appear to have been translated from Portuguese via an auto translation tool. Bro, you almost cut off the recording after my sister said she was working. If you had no evil, you would have asked if I helped in any way, but you knew if you prolonged the conversation, you knew I wouldn't have a good material for you. But for people who are trying to win in life, it would be very important. I will do an interview talking about it at the best time, and I will talk about your attitude to the interviewees and especially to my sister. You don't deserve to have this kind of work with this evil creating discord and transmitting it to the good people. I will reinforce in the video Dana White's stop, and I'm going to get more behind the scenes insights with his co-workers. You like media, so you're going to get media. Fire. Not surprisingly, Pereira's comments drew plenty of reactions online. Cruz was nice enough to do an interview with Aileen ahead of her nothing burger of a fight in Karate Combat tonight, and Alex threatens him because he didn't inquire about the latter financially supporting the former. Hard to tell what his gripe is in Portuguese. MMA media will go for the clicks instead of defending a journalist who published a rather innocuous story. Cruz is an absolute OG Brazilian MMA journalist. We used to interview him on live radio 15 years ago back in 2010. Wild to see Alex go after him like this. Guillem Cruz now has beef with Poatan and Dana White. If I was a multimillionaire and on good terms with my siblings, there's not a chance they'd be delivering packages. This is wild LMAO. Yeah, Alex is wrong. The reporter has nothing to do with his sister being an Amazon deliverer when he's one of the richest fighters on the roster right now. If you want to get mad with his sister for saying she's working in the middle of the night while he's buying McLarens. What if Alex offered her money and she turned it down? I know it's rare in America, but there are some people who take pride in providing for themselves. Respect to Aileen for still working, even though her brother can and I'm pretty sure does help out in everything they might need. Guy is not that rich, already old, won't be earning that much money, and has his own family with children. He simply can't completely cover all costs of living and training for his sister, otherwise we'll be back working as a mechanic in his 50s. Some people are so dumb, lol. She has to work as per her visa agreement, lol. Alex isn't making her work, the US government is, so she can get her citizenship, lol. There's a reason she's only working part-time hours for close to minimum wage. Cruz is a piece of like most of the fake news. Some, I assume, are fine people. And Chris Cyborg's X account included this response. One of about 4 reporters I told my team I will no longer do media with. Ariel, another one. What do you think of Pereira's response? And was it justified? Alex Pereira's sister, Aileen, won her fight with another knockout last night. After the win, she ran out and hugged Alex. Do you think the UFC should sign Aileen? Dana White and the UFC released 5 fighters from their active roster last night. These fighters included Magomed Gadzhiasulov, who was a Dana White Contender Series winner and was 2-1 in the UFC. Victoria Dudakova was part of the women's strawweight division and went 2-2 in the UFC. This is also the same fighter that slapped her coach earlier this month. Jose Johnson, who won 1 out of 4 fights in the UFC. Ihor Portieria was a light heavyweight who had recorded 2 wins and 6 losses in the UFC. He was also a Dana White Contender Series winner. And lastly, Josephine Knudsen was 2-1 with the UFC, and her lone loss was the recent one in UFC Tampa. She reportedly signed with the GFL. Surprisingly, Tony Ferguson was not one of the names on the list that were removed from the roster after signing with the GFL. For those of you wondering if the rumors are true about Tony Ferguson, it looks like many reputable outlets like MMA Junkie have confirmed that Ferguson and the UFC have parted ways. When it was initially reported, many people were skeptical because some of the GFL signings came out and denied it. But until Dana White or Tony Ferguson come out and confirm the signing, have some doubts. And before we continue, we have a favor to ask. Help us reach 200,000 subscribers on MMA Zone by subscribing and turning on notifications for daily MMA content. Seriously, we rarely miss a day.
Weight cutting is, in my opinion, the worst aspect of the sport. Islam Makhachev is so good, and he's so big. He's another one. You stand next to him, you're like, how does this guy make 170? I think weight cutting should be eliminated. Get rid of weight cutting. Just stop it. If it's not, look, if you can randomly test people for you can randomly test their weight. Show up with a scale. Hey, buddy, step on the scale. You're 190 pounds. How the are you making 145?
Yeah, right.
Do
that's
something
right.
like that.
That's right.
Come up with more weight classes. There should be a weight class every 10 pounds. Instead of having weight cuts, just take the champions, find out what the champion weighs. Find out what does Islam Makhachev weigh. Islam Makhachev is a UFC champion, best pound for pound fighter on earth. Find out what he weighs. What do you weigh if you were healthy, if weight cutting didn't exist? Would it be 185? Okay, 190? Whatever that is. That's how you fight now.
Yep.
And we're not gonna weigh you in the day before and let you rehydrate. That's crazy talk. Fight people your size.
Yeah.
And I know this is not an easy thing to do, but I do think it's just like getting steroids out of fighting. When they brought in USADA, when USADA came in, you saw people's physiques melt. You saw people that were doing steroids on a regular basis and gaming the system and testing negative on the day of the fight, but all throughout their camp they were using. You saw their bodies change. Weight cutting should not exist. It's terrible for you. It's unnecessary. It's not necessary. It's just sanctioned cheating that we've done forever. If you're telling me that Alex Pereira, when he fought Israel Adesanya, he weighed 185 one day and 226 the next day. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Weight cutting is something that exists. It's sanctioned. They allow it to happen. They know what's going on, and it's cheating.
That's right.
They're not really 170 pounds. That guy's 195. He's depleted and dried out, and then he's going to swell back up again, and he's going to look huge the next day. Like Dricus.
Everything is evolving, so...
Yes,
so
they should evolve
to,
that, because for the safety of the fighters, for the safety of the fighters, it's not good to dehydrate your brain 24 hours before a cage fight.
That's right.
It's dumb.
Yep.